Hi guys, so today's video is going to be part 2 of the Rhythm of War spoilery chats. I will have part 1 linked down below, but this is going to have the start be the first set of interludes all the way through the end of part 2. A couple of things before we jump into it. I am going to be going through these pretty rapid fire because I am going to be having a longer formatted chat over on World Hoppers on December 9th. Also, I will have a calendar over here so that you can have a schedule for yourself to know when part 3, 4, and 5 are going up. That's going to lead us all the way up to that World Hoppers chat. And then also, I have read all of the book at this point. So when I reference theories that I have, I'm specifically talking about theories that I had at that point in the book. Jumping into it, starting with the first of the interludes with Syl. I thought this was the most precious interlude. I loved getting a Syl point of view. Her talking to Dalinar about wanting to understand Kaladin. I tabbed these little teal colored tabs are things that I think are good for references later on, and this one really stuck out to me. It was just, here you go, as far as some of Dalinar's abilities and powers, since we're still, I think, a little in the dark about what he's capable of. So I'll read that off really quick. It says, your abilities are what made the original Oath Pact, and they existed and were named long before the Knights Radiant were founded. A bondsmith connected the heralds to Braze, made them immortal, and locked our enemies away. A bondsmith bound our surges and brought humans to Roshar, fleeing their dying world. A bondsmith created, or at least discovered, the Nile Bond, the ability of Spren and humans to join together into something better. You connect things, Dalinar, realms, ideas, people. The second interlude, I'm not even going to try to say this particular, I'm not going to say it because I know I'm going to say it wrong, but I tabbed once again another teal tab for references to the world and such. So this one, I just think this whole section is very ominous because it seems like that they want to oppose Odium, kind of, sort of, but do they? Like, for the greater good? Or seems very foreboding. But anyway, it says she didn't fully understand the laws that bound him, Odium. They were ancient, related to compacts between the shards, the high gods of the Cosmere. Odium wasn't simply the mind that controlled the power, the vessel. Nor was he merely that power alone, the shard. He was both, and at times it seemed the power had desires that were counter to the purposes of the vessel. Just that part, I think, ties into a lot of the, I'm going to call them epigraphs, the before chapter sections. So many of the things that you see before the chapters have to do with that right there, I think. So as far as theories go, I think that these sorts of things, we're going to end up seeing these quotes come back a lot. Then we get the Taravangian one, and I don't know about you guys, Taravangian always makes me sad, because what he's doing is pretty messed up, but also I'm like, on some days you're stupid and emotional. But also, we all knew, right, that Taravangian, we couldn't trust him. Chapter 20, we get a lot of all of Shallan's personalities and the whole fact there's potentially a spy. We're kind of furthering that, setting that up, and then also prepping for Shadesmar. I did really like that the Unseen Court, that name evidently annoyed the Windrunners, and they're like, ugh. Chapter 21, the epigraph. I know I said I wouldn't be referencing things outside of this book, but that seems to be related to Dawnshard. But anyway, I mentioned in part 1 that I have pretty light pink tabs that, are for when Adolin is being Adolin. I'm picking out his outfit. I get wanting to look good. I get wanting to make sure that your outfit is useful, but they're about to go on a really, really important mission, and it's not even really about, like, I want to make sure that I'm wearing something that the Spren, they'll respect. He's just like, which one do I like the most? And he's, like, taking all this time. Shallan's like, I'll tell them that you'll be down, later. And he's like, 15 minutes, or like maybe a half hour. And I'm just like, dude, there's some really important things going on. Maybe prep more than just your outfit. But whatever, it's fine. I actually do really like this scene, though, after that part. But I really like that he was looking out for Kaladin. He wanted to check on Kaladin, say goodbye, and also leave him with this sense of, it's okay to like the fighting, but maybe we can find a way to like it that doesn't involve totally harming your mental health. But I have a theory. So you guys may or may not know that I have a theory that Adolin is going to become Odium's champion. And I kind of feel like this part is setting up for that, because he's basically saying, hey, Kaladin, when I come back, we'll have to duel sometime. And I just feel like we're going to come back to this scene and they're going to end up having to duel. It's going to be Kaladin and Adolin. And it's going to be that moment and Kaladin's going to have the coin, but it's going to be all heartbreaking. That's my prediction. After that, I'm not sorry that I'm picking on Adolin. This was just really funny to me. So he notices that there's like a different person and that Shallan had been really particular about who was going to come with them. And it just says, he notices this person, and in the narrative it says, he nodded absently as the woman hurried up the slope. Shallan had seemed very particular, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, well, nothing to do about it. It's like, they're kind of, sort of, you could just make sure before you took enough time to pick out your outfit. You might want to go check with your wife and be like, hey, I know you cared about who was coming along, and I totally get why after what happened with Eli, so is this something that we need to worry about? No. And then a moment I was finally waiting for, which was Adolin and his dad talking, because I had mentioned with part 1 that I wish we had gotten Adolin finding out about his mother. We missed that scene, but then we get this scene, and I was waiting for this. And it was juicy. I liked this encounter. Dalinar had some good lines in here. Murdering a man in a back alley, then lying about it? Well, the world is better off without him. In fact, there are a lot of people this world could do without. Let's start removing them quietly. And he's saying this referencing, this line of thinking and all that stuff. And then Adolin's thoughts. Maybe I murdered Sadeas, but at least I never killed anyone innocent. At least I didn't burn my own wife to death. And then part of me's like, you should get it out, man. You should say that. And I mean, because he confronted Dalinar all the time in Way of Kings, like, Dad, you're just getting old and crazy and it's embarrassing and like, just be cooler. I feel like that was him in Way of Kings. And then in this one, he's got like all this anger and he's not getting it out, and I really want him to get it out. But also I don't, because I still want my theory to come true of him becoming evil. So part of me is like, maybe you should keep it all inside. After that, we have chapter 22, and this one I just really liked all the different kinds of Spren in Shadesmar. I thought that was really fun, but also one of my favorite moments in this section is when Adolin's like trying to put his arm around Shallan, and then Pattern comes up, and then he stops talking, he trails off, and it says he found Pattern standing behind them, giving both of them a hug. I have arms. I like having arms. If Maya does not speak, and you want to hear someone speak, I am very good at talking. I can say words about many kinds of things. I want to know, my husband likes Pattern more than Syl. I'm curious how many of you like Pattern more than Syl, or do you like Syl more than Pattern? Then, of course, we get the spy plotline intensifying with the cube having clearly been used by someone. I'm very curious, when you were at this point in the story, who did you think the spy was? Chapter 23, we're back with Kaladin, and I tabbed the part. I know it's so simple, it's not like this is super beautiful in the actual words that are used, but when he's reflecting on his happiness, and it says, was he happy? He wasn't sad. For now, he'd accept not sad. I feel like that's very relatable. Also, since we just talked about a great Pattern moment, I really liked that Syl started giggling at the word constipation. And then Teft, it was really nice to see that Teft stayed, because I feel like we needed somebody from Bridgefort to still be there with Kaladin. Chapter 24, we're back with Shallan and Adolin. The spy stuff is getting more serious, but also you guys know, not only do I not love Adolin, I don't mind Shallan. I know there are a lot of people who don't really like Shallan, but I find her very interesting. But her and Adolin, I don't like them together. They're just, ugh. And the part where she makes the little joke, the pun, about like, when she says that it would be hilarious, and he's like really confused, and he's like, but high isn't the sound. And I'm just like, Adolin, come on. Something else I want to note about the two of them is they're always really cool with the things that the other person has done. So Adolin, when he was like, I killed Sadeas, and then she was like, okay, I mean, Sadeas sucked. And now, she's saying like, I robbed Yasna actually, and he's just like, oh, ha ha ha. They're very ride or die, which I guess that's cool. But also, I almost feel like this feeds into a theory that one or both of them will eventually not necessarily align with the other characters, potentially, because they seem to care so much about each other that they don't really care what the other has done. And I feel like that's kind of concerning. Chapter 25, it's a quieter chapter, but for me it was one of the hardest hitting chapters when Kaladin is looking for this individual and realizing that they literally have no idea what they're doing with anybody who has battle shock, PTSD, depression, anything, any mental thing. They don't know what to do. And him seeing what they are doing, and there was a few quotes. This one, it's like, I almost cried reading this quote, but when he says to that man, "You wonder how can a man breathe but already be dead?" Man, that stuff got me. It hit me so hard. And then the very next page, you have Syl being adorable with the Axehound puppies when she says, "They're the grossest things on the planet, Kaladin. They're somehow so gross that they're cute. So cute I could have died. Except I can't because I'm an eternal sliver of God himself, and we have standards about things like that." And then we have another Kaladin quote right after that that's also really hard-hitting, I think, when he's continuing this conversation with this man, and he said, "You don't want to actually kill yourself, not on most days, but you figure it sure would be convenient if you weren't around anymore." That one too, even reading it out loud, makes me want to cry. I mean, I've been there. Then we have chapter 26, and I felt so bad when Shallan was really pushing at Ishna, and then it turned out Ishna had accidentally sort of kind of funded crime, and then Shallan was like, whoops. Also, you'll have to let me know, did you think it was strange that Shallan referred to Formless as a he at one point? It says, "Become the person she deserved to be. Formless, who had been hiding deep inside these last few days, stirred. She'd thought him forgotten, but he had been waiting." I don't have a ton to say about chapter 27. I think Navani's point of view at this point is really prepping for a lot of things to come, and this particular chapter is prepping not just her point of view, but also Dalinar's point of view. So this one just kind of felt like some setup. I will say for chapter 28, I totally spaced when I did this for part 1 in mentioning this person, this being that was messaging Navani, and they were really mysterious and everything, and you're like, what the heck is going on? I'm curious, when you were at this point, who or what you thought this was, if they were tricking Navani. In chapter 29, I did really like seeing Maya mimic Adolin. I thought it was kind of cute. I do think chapter 30 was a little more interesting, especially seeing the Spren from Oathbringer and what has happened with them. I think when you see their exile, it really does a nice job of presenting how impossible this mission is. In chapter 31, I gotta say, I actually really like, and I'm sure I'm gonna say it wrong, but Rabaniel, I find this character so interesting. Obviously now we're setting up for them to go to Urithiru, which isn't great for our good guys, but also, is Rabaniel really a super bad guy? I feel like I felt for this character a lot. In chapter 32 with Adolin, this kind of reiterates what I was saying before about how comfortable the two of them, Adolin and Shallan, are with whatever the heck the other person is doing. He says it at the end of this chapter when he's talking to Vale, but he wants to actually talk to Shallan. And he says, "Make sure she knows that I don't care what she did." I feel like it kind of matters what she did. I mean, you should care a little bit what she did. Chapter 33 is short and sweet, but man, again, I feel like has so much impact because basically it's like a yay therapy chapter. Chapter 34, I have thoughts, but I just, Adolin at the end of this chapter, it's fine that he's expressing himself to his wife. He's sharing his feelings, and I'm glad they're there for each other. I feel like I can't actually comment on what he's saying here because there might be people that relate to it, and it would go from me teasingly talking about a fictional character to me potentially, I don't know, making you feel bad if you relate to this, so I'm not gonna comment. I do think it's interesting how much he feels this pressure on his shoulders from his father. We saw that a little bit back in chapter 21. And then in chapter 35, it's exactly what I was saying before when it says, "A spy had infiltrated their quest here. Perhaps he hadn't devoted enough thought to that particular problem." In chapter 36, I think things get very intriguing with the possibility of Pattern being the spy. That's one of those like, what moments, I thought anyway. But then I want to point out something else too in this, where they're talking about, at the very end of the chapter, oh my gosh, what are we supposed to do? They're not going to let us in. And Adolin's like, we don't have any other choice. And Shallan says, we could turn around. And then Adolin thinks, and face my father, having failed him again. I think this is very interesting because it's kind of the same, this pressure he's feeling. And they need these honor spren. They need them for the greater good of Roshar, for our good guys to have more Windrunners. And instead of thinking, we need these honor spren to help us with this war, to help us fight Odium, he thinks, and face my father, having failed him again. Like, he's still thinking about what his dad's gonna think, not the greater impact of what getting these honor spren on their side means. I think that's very interesting. In chapter 37, tons of tension is building. You can feel the stakes starting to go up, so I think it's really exciting in this chapter. But then also, there was a part that I thought was really notable when they're talking about people that have something with mental health, and Kaladin says, nobody knows anything because they don't want to know. People like me scare them. And his father immediately says, don't include yourself in that group, son. And I love that Kaladin pushes him back on that. Why shouldn't I? You're not, and then ... and he says, insane? That's the problem, isn't it? We don't see them as our brothers, sisters, children. They make us feel helpless. We are afraid because we can't bind a broken mind the way we do a broken finger. And then his dad thanks him for challenging him on that. I really liked that interaction between the two of them. I thought it was great, and especially because obviously Lirin has always been this figure to help Kaladin help other people when it comes to healing. And I really liked that kind of reverse where they're working together, but it's Kaladin who's kind of pushing this idea with his dad and them conversing about it. I thought that was really well done. Chapter 38 had a couple of parts that oh my gosh. So Kaladin just can't catch a break. So, the tension is continuing to build, which is so sad because you see it juxtaposing with where Kaladin is. And he has this moment where they're like, you should go to therapy too, Kaladin. Basically therapy. They haven't really titled it that, but that's basically what they're saying. And he thinks that maybe he should, but Kaladin being Kaladin and being a nice guy who's always caring about other people, where it says he just wasn't sure he deserved to divert resources or time from them. Kaladin still had a family. He had support. He wasn't locked away in darkness. How could he worry about himself when others needed him? I love that line, especially because I think something that's really difficult for people is when they are having their own issues, but they're really self-sacrificing at the same time. They constantly do that. They're constantly telling themselves, no, I don't need it because other people need it. I don't need it. And then right after that, when it says, I think I might be putting myself back together for the first time in my life. And then that chapter ends with seize the city. This is where things are really starting to get so tense. The part in the next chapter, chapter 39, when he goes to use his powers, and then it just says, and it didn't work. And it just it hit me like it hit him. Oh my gosh. And then when Kaladin freezes up and he's just shaking and he's thinking like he needs to help people and he can't because it's all coming back to him and he hasn't, again, the juxtaposition of that last chapter to this is so heartbreaking. In chapter 40, there's a really random quote that I really liked. I'm going to read to you guys, and maybe this didn't stand out to anybody else, but when Navani is trying to take care of everything and get into action, take action, and she's talking to the one individual and asks, well, the masculine arts, is everybody all put off by me commanding? And they say, I figure the Blackthorn has studied every military text known to man, and we could do worse for a general than the person who likely read them to him, particularly if she's willing to listen to a little sense. That's more than I can say for some High Lords I've followed. I liked that random guy. And then the sibling speaking. In chapter 41, we get one of my favorite quotes from Rabanyul when talking about humans. It says, if there is one thing I can guarantee you about humankind, last listener, it is this: provide them with a sword and they will find a way to impale themselves upon it. The next chapter, chapter 42, we get a great quote from Navani, just being ruthless, and I loved it, when it says, I hope when you die knowing your homeland is doomed, your family's enslaved, your queen executed, you feel satisfied knowing that at least you maintained a slight market advantage, when she's talking to those other people and they won't just help her with the thing that might help them all. I liked that line. Chapter 43, the title might as well just be Lirin sucking, because oh my gosh, the things that Lirin says in this chapter made me so mad. When Lirin said to Kaladin, "What would have happened, son, if instead of trying so hard to escape all those years, you'd instead proven yourself to your masters? What if you'd shown them you could heal instead of kill? How much misery would you have saved the world if you'd used your talents instead of your fists?" I was so mad at that, because in the slave cart he tried, there was so many times when Kaladin tried to help people, and the Light Eyes were terrible. There were always people working against him. I could kind of forgive him for saying that, though, because I think he just so badly didn't want Kaladin to engage, which I totally understand. But at the end of this chapter, when he's all upset because Kaladin didn't want Teft to be taken, and Kaladin finally decides, like, I gotta fight back, and his dad says, "Storms, my son has become a monster." And I'm just like, yeah, what did you think soldiers did? But I really love that Kaladin says, I've taken oaths too, father. I'm sorry I'm not the man you wanted me to be, but if I were a monster, I would never have let the other soldier go. And then he leaves. And again, I know I know a lot of people like to compare Kaladin to Moash, but this right here highlights, this is why I kind of focused in on Adolin and the expectations from Dalinar as his father, and then here, Kaladin and the expectations from Lirin, where Kaladin at the end of the day is kind of like, nah, man, I gotta do what I gotta do, and he's not really, that's not really weighing on him the same way. I don't know, I'm getting these similar paths of these two characters in a very roundabout kind of way. Maybe I just really want Adolin and Kaladin. Maybe I just wanted a little too much and I'm looking for it. That took us to the end of part 2. I loved part 2. I think part 1 had a lot more action, but man, this part sets you up just to have the tower taken. I just feel like that section did such a good job of setting up the rest of the book while still being really impactful. Let me know your thoughts on part 2. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.